My dear friends, good day and Vanakkam. It gives me great pleasure to talk to you today. It's an emotional moment for me, though I'm not one who is easily overcome by emotions. It's 38 years since I last spoke to an audience in the Jaffna University. After leaving the university, I never thought that a day will come when I would address an audience in the Jaffna University from thousands of kilometers away from the safety of my home. Such is the nature and marvel of the technological changes that have taken place since I left Jaffna. The Faculty of Arts and the Jaffna University have come a long way since then. In 2 years' time, the university will be celebrating its Golden Jubilee. In my talk, I wish to say something about the beginnings of this university and deal with the first decade of the Faculty of Humanities, which later became the Faculty of Arts. I'll be dealing with the humanities departments only. I'm glad that the faculty is celebrating 100 years of an event of national importance and staking its claim to be a national institution. As you all are gathered on this day to celebrate 100 years of humanities and social science education in Sri Lanka, I think it's not inappropriate for me to present my own humble view about that celebration. The setting up of the University College in Colombo is being taken to mark the beginnings of modern humanities education in Sri Lanka. I am not in full agreement with that view. Pardon me for beginning my talk with a note of disagreement. Almost 100 years before the opening of the University College, in 1823, the first steps were taken to introduce modern, Western style, liberal humanities education at the tertiary level in Sri Lanka, not in Colombo, but in your locality, in Jaffna. Jaffna, I mean the Jaffna region, took the lead not only in this area of higher education, but also in Western medical training long before the Ceylon Medical College was established in Colombo. Jaffna also led the way in female education when the American missionaries founded the first girls' boarding school at Woodville. These early developments provide part of the explanation for some of the issues faced by the Jaffna society today. Let me place before you some of the facts on which I base my view. The American missionaries came to Jaffna soon after the British began their rule in Sri Lanka, early in the 19th century. They started Tamil primary schools all over the peninsula and soon felt the need to establish an institution for higher learning. And in 1823, just 25 years after the beginning of British rule in Sri Lanka, they founded the Batikota Seminary at Pattukote. Batikota was the anglicized form of the Tamil name. The humanities subjects taught in the American and European universities at that time were taught at the seminary. In addition to Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, Tamil and Sanskrit were taught in the same place. Sanskrit teaching at Oxford began later than that, in 1832, and at Harvard even later. For you to get an understanding of the nature of education imparted at the seminary, I wish to point to two things. One is a much quoted statement by British colonial administrator Sir Emerson Tennant. Tennant was the colonial secretary in Colombo, visited Jaffna in 1848 and went to see the working of the seminary. He was impressed and later wrote in his book, and I quote, "The collegiate institution at Paticota is entitled to rank with many European universities." I repeat that. The collegiate institution at Paticota is entitled to rank with many European universities. He was qualified to say that because he himself had come out of one of those universities. The second thing that I wish to point out here is an episode that will give an indication of the level of the humanities education at the Batikota Seminary and the nature of the results it produced. In 1857, the first modern universities in South Asia were established in Bombay, now Mumbai, Calcutta, now Kolkata, and Madras, now Chennai. When the University of Madras held its very first degree examination for the Bachelor of Arts, only two passed it to become the first graduates. Both had gone from Jaffna, and both had studied at the Batikota Seminary. One of them, C.W. Damodaram Pillai, went on to make a significant contribution to the humanities in South India. He collected ancient Tamil texts which were on the verge of getting lost, edited them, and wrote critical commentaries. And all this before U.V. Swaminatha Iyer began editing and publishing ancient Tamil texts. The humanities education started by the Bachakota Seminary was continued even after it was closed. Jaffna College, which succeeded the seminary, was not just a secondary school. Interest in teaching humanities at the tertiary level continued at Jaffna College. The college became affiliated to the University of Calcutta in 1891, to the University of Madras in 1907, and to the University of London in 1921. Preparing students for the London University external degree examinations continued till the 1960s. In 1947, a separate undergraduate department was created for the degree courses with the president as its head, like in the United States. S.K. Bunker, the first president, was the last of the American missionaries who headed Jaffna College. Degree courses were conducted in this department for London University examinations until the 1960s. After that, courses were conducted for the degree examinations of the University of Ceylon until 1974. Now we all know that the government established the Jaffna campus of the University of Sri Lanka in 1974. But many may not know what really happened in 1974. There were not enough places in the university campuses to admit all the students who qualified for admission, and the government was under pressure to open a new campus. But the government was facing serious financial difficulties at that time. It appears to me, I have no evidence for this, but one day someone will research and find this out. It appears to me that some advisor to the government saw an easy way out, and that was to take over the undergraduate department of Jaffna College and create a new campus of the University of Sri Lanka. And so, this undergraduate department was taken over with its students, staff, and assets to form a new Jaffna campus. A school at Tirunelveli was closed down and its premises were added to the new campus. These, in brief, are the facts on which I base my view that the beginnings of modern Western-style liberal humanities education at the tertiary level in Sri Lanka go back to 1823, and that this education continued Even after the closing of the Bachikota Seminary, it continued at Jaffna College until 1974, when the undergraduate department of that college became the nucleus of the new Jaffna campus, which later became the University of Jaffna. What I have said so far will also form a backdrop to the subject of my talk, which is the first decade of the Faculty of Humanities in the Jaffna campus, afterwards the University of Jaffna. I'm not going to give you a critical history of the first 10 years. My talk is a short narrative from a personal perspective of what happened and the challenges faced when the foundation was being laid for the faculty's development. As one who was intimately involved with this work, I thought of focusing on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that the new faculty had in its early years, what is called a SWOT analysis, partly as a personal record and partly as an experience from which something of value could be learned. I may start with the weaknesses first. Then you may be able to appreciate the strengths. As I said earlier, the establishment of the Jaffna campus was the result of a sudden decision by the government. And this meant there was no studied plan or policy for some guidance. This was the biggest weakness that the Faculty of Humanities had when it was founded. What was taken over from Jaffna College was actually a very small unit. It was not organized as a faculty. The establishment of the Jaffna campus was seen as a politically motivated action. This public perception was certainly disadvantageous to the new institution. The main political party in the north was opposed to the new campus. There were also other forces that were not in favor of the new campus. As a result of the unfavorable political atmosphere in the peninsula, the establishment of a university campus in Jaffna did not meet with the excitement and celebration that one would have expected. But this was only at the beginning, in the very first year. Very soon, the situation changed, and I'll deal with that shortly. I may, at this stage, briefly recount the sequence of events leading to the opening of the new campus. In July 1974, the Minister of Education announced that a new university campus would be established in Jaffna. At that time, all the universities in the island had been brought under one umbrella as campuses of the University of Sri Lanka. A few days after the minister's announcement, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Sri Lanka released the news that Dr. K. Kailashpati had been selected for appointment as the president of the Jaffna campus. Kailashpati was, at that time, head of the Department of Tamil and Hindu Studies of the Vidyalankara campus, which is now the University of Kelaniya. Following a Gazette notification announcing the creation of the Jaffna campus, Kailashpati assumed duties as its first president in August. A few days later, Kailashpati met me with a shocking request. He wanted me to accept the post of Dean of the Faculty of Humanities and assist him to build the new campus. I was completely taken aback. I never had any ambition for such positions. Besides, I had fallen in love with the Peradeniya campus and never had ideas of leaving that place. And more importantly, to be honest, I was not in favor of opening another Tamil medium campus. The main reason was the fear of being left with a depleted Tamil medium staff in Peradeniya at a time when we were struggling to find qualified staff to teach in Tamil. The only strong and fully fledged Tamil medium section at Peradeniya in the humanities, namely the Department of Tamil, was already getting depleted as a result of 3 of its PhDs leaving it to join the faculty in Colombo. I was seriously concerned about falling standards in the Tamil medium courses. Kailashpati argued that he would not be able to build a good campus if persons like me refused to help him. Giving valid reasons, he finally persuaded me to go with him to Jaffna. Flowing from the unprepared way the new faculty was established, we faced the problem of finding suitable staff. The problem was exacerbated by the need to get lectures in the Tamil as well as the Sinhala medium. As I said, the older campuses were still struggling to get adequate qualified Tamil medium staff for the humanities and social science courses. And so, the lack of qualified senior staff was one of the main weaknesses of the humanities faculty when it started. When viewed in this background, the president was a source of great strength to the faculty. When Kailasapati was appointed as president, he was already a well-recognized and highly respected scholar, respected for the depth of his research. In the world of Tamil literature, he was a brilliant, original, and creative thinker and critic. For his PhD, he had done a path-breaking study of the ancient Tamil heroic poetry, which is commonly referred to as the Sangam poems, comparing it with similar Greek, Irish, Teutonic, Slavonic, Icelandic, and other heroic poems. His thesis had already been published by the Oxford University Press in England under the title of Tamil Heroic Poetry. This was a significant contribution to international scholarship. And before joining the university, Kailasapati had served as the editor-in-chief of one of the leading national Tamil dailies, the Thinagaran, and had given new directions to Tamil journalism in Sri Lanka. He stimulated serious literary activities and inspired a whole new generation of young writers who were the products of nearly a decade of complete Tamil medium education at the secondary schools. So, here we had a reputed and dedicated humanist as president to give the faculty all the necessary support. He mixed with ease with scholars and politicians. As a leader in the new campus, he was uncorrupting and incorruptible. He was what one may call politically savvy and could deftly handle any political interference. Kailasapati was appointed the first professor of Tamil in the faculty, and despite the heavy administrative duties, he helped to design the courses and took lectures in the Tamil department. He also helped the history department by taking some lectures in South Indian history. In 1977, he went on sabbatical leave to the United States, and when he returned in 1978, he served as the Dean of the Faculty of Arts until his untimely demise in December 1982. By that time, the Tamil department had emerged as the strongest in the faculty. The proper organization of the departments of the faculty began when the chairs for Tamil, Sinhala, Hindu civilization, and history were advertised and filled. The professor of Hindu civilization, Kailasanatha Kurkul, was a recognized scholar of Sanskrit with a PhD from the well-known Deccan College of Pune University. With his deep knowledge of the Hindu scriptures, he was able to organize the new department, which was the first separate department for Hindu studies in a Sri Lankan university. And he was able to lay the foundation for the development of the department. He was associated with the Sanskrit department of Peradeniya from its inception, and that experience was a source of strength to the department. The Sinhala department made a very good start with the appointment of Sucharita Gamlat, a scholar well versed not only in Sinhala but also in Pali, Sanskrit, and English, and he was one considered to be a great intellectual with a deep commitment to Sinhala Tamil harmony. A Marxist intellectual, he was also a lexicographer who worked in his later years on a monumental English Sinhala Tamil, that is, trilingual dictionary. Above all, he was an aesthetician involved in literary debates relating to Sanskrit aesthetics and Western aesthetics. In fact, his PhD thesis, for which he worked in the University of London, was not in the field of Sinhala literature or language. It was a comparative study of Indian and Western aesthetics. It was a philosophical investigation into the nature and role of emotion in art. An advocate of the rights of minorities, he was a well-known political activist. It must not be forgotten that in later years, Gamlat was punished by the UNP government for his political opposition. Gamlat was able to persuade two like-minded young Sinhala scholars to join his department. They later became reputed directors in the world of Sinhala cinema. So it would not be an exaggeration to say that Jaffna, right at the start, had a strong and progressive Sinhala department that was ready to break new ground. As for the Department of History, I was appointed to the chair, but I had difficulties finding qualified lecturers. We had to rely on the help given by the lecturer in Sanskrit for some of the ancient Indian history courses. As I was very keen on having an archaeology unit in the department, I recruited an assistant lecturer who had a master's degree in archaeology from the University of Pune. But the situation improved a couple of years later with the transfer from Colombo of a lecturer with a master's degree in modern history. The department gained further strength with the recruitment of another archaeologist with a degree in archaeology from the University of Mysore. The only other humanities department in the faculty in 1974 was the Sanskrit department. A lecturer with a master's degree in Sanskrit had already been absorbed from the Jaffna College undergraduate department, and he took charge of the Sanskrit department. So far, I have dealt with only the academic staff of the faculty, but there was another important area in which the faculty was very strong from the very beginning. This was the library. I need to tell you how this came about. In October 1974, when we went to Tirunelveli, the Tirunelveli site, which was to be the home of the humanities faculty, there was a large empty building, the present Ramanathan block, and a smaller abandoned building, which we were told was unfit for use. I was not too worried about classrooms, but I needed a decent place for a library. We invited some civil engineers to inspect the abandoned building and found that it could be used for a few more years. We therefore decided to have that building to house the library. We were fortunate that there was a qualified and very experienced librarian who had joined us from Jaffna College. He was R.S. Thambaiya, who had a master's degree in library science from the University of Illinois in the US. Through his dedicated efforts, we soon had a good library for the faculty. I may at this point mention that the librarian was later assisted by a young British volunteer from Northern Ireland, whose services had been arranged through, I think, the British Council. This young man was the only foreigner on the staff of the Jaffna campus in its early years. Now, where did the books come from? That's another story. We had three major collections that were brought to fill the empty building. Each one was very valuable in its own way. The first collection came from Jaffna College. It had its origins in the Batikota Seminary, and there were many rare books in this collection. The second was Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan's collection, which had been carted away from Parameshwara College to Ramanathan College before the buildings were handed over to the university. We tracked it down to Ramanathan College and managed to bring it back to Tirunelveli. The third collection was the Seneret Parnavitana collection. Parnavitana, as you may be knowing, was the first Sri Lankan archaeological commissioner, and in his retirement he also served as a research professor of archaeology at Peradeniya. His collection, consisting of very valuable and rare publications on South Asian archaeology and ancient history, was sold at an auction to the Jaffna Archaeological Society, and the Jaffna campus bought it from the society. In addition, the library also had the Evelyn Ratnam collection. With all these collections, the faculty had a reasonably good humanities library in its early years. Let me now move on to the opportunities that the humanities faculty had. At this point, bear with me for switching from the first person to the third person in my narrative, so that it doesn't sound presumptuous or self-adulatory. Now, to put it simply, the establishment of a humanities faculty in Jaffna provided enormous opportunities to the faculty and the community around it. Although it was pointed out earlier that the lack of a serious plan or strategy was a notable weakness, in fact, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise to the dean of the faculty. For it gave him a free hand to implement the ideas he had in mind. Without taking too much of time and going into details, a few words about the dean may be briefly said in order to understand the ethos created in the faculty in the early years. The faculty functioned in a very unorthodox and unconventional manner. To the dean, the establishment of the Jaffna campus was a dream come true, a dream of the American missionaries in the 1820s and the dream of Sir Ponnambalam Ramanathan in the 1920s. The dean had clearly stated this in an unsigned article he wrote for the souvenir released at the opening of the campus. An idealist, he was keen that the faculty should live up to the ideals of the American missionaries and Ramanathan, and that the campus should emerge as a recognized center of higher learning, a center for intellectual pursuit and creative as well as critical thinking. And more importantly, embrace diversity. His ideas were shaped by his study of and admiration for some traditional centers of learning, especially the great medieval Islamic centers at Baghdad in the Middle East and Cordoba in Spain, the ancient Indian centers at Nalanda and Kanchi, and Rabindranath Tagore's Shantiniketan. The Islamic centers gave high recognition to Jewish and Christian scholars, eagerly sought out books in Sanskrit, Greek, Latin, Persian, and other languages, and translated them into Arabic to promote Arab learning, and functioned with a remarkable spirit of openness towards other religions. The dean wished to promote that spirit of learning without discriminatory practices. He was also a staunch feminist and an anti-caste advocate with a deep commitment to equality and liberty. In addition, he was a strong supporter of student rights. All this helped to create that ethos in which the distinctions between academic staff and non-academic staff, between the so-called minor staff and higher staff, were blurred, where there was no room for discrimination based on caste or other social differences, where women were treated with great respect. Coming to the academic area, there was freedom to leave the beaten track and move along a new path. 15 years of experience in Tamil medium instruction at Peradeniya helped to identify some of the serious shortcomings. Here was an opportunity to adopt measures to avoid these shortcomings and develop the faculty. It's not possible to go into all these in this talk, but there's one that is important, and I suspect it may still be a relevant matter. The poor knowledge of English among the students enrolling for humanities subjects affected their ability to read journals and reference books and brought down the quality of their degrees. And, unsurprisingly, their general knowledge was also poor. It was therefore decided to introduce 3 compulsory courses for all students in the faculty, namely Basic English, Basic Mathematics, and a general knowledge course called the Compendious course, for want of a better name. To give the faculty a broad focus, emphasis was laid on South Asian studies. A faculty journal was started with the name Sri Lanka Journal of South Asian Studies. A specialized reference section was set aside in the library with the name South Asia Room, which brought together publications, especially research publications and journals on South Asia. And more importantly, a forum for special lectures was started with the name of South Asian Studies Seminar. Several well-known foreign scholars like Professor Howard Riggins of the Columbia University, who was at that time the American ambassador in Sri Lanka, Professor A.K. Ramanujan from the University of Chicago, and even artists like the famous sitarist Ravi Shankar addressed the seminar. In addition, an annual seminar on South Asian epigraphy was held in collaboration with the Jaffna Archaeological Society, and every year the chief guest was from the Peradeniya campus or the Department of Archaeology. They included Professor P.E.E. Fernando, the professor of Sinhala at Peradeniya and a well-known Sinhala epigraphist, Professor O.H.T.A. Vijayasekara, who was professor of Sanskrit at Peradeniya, Dr. Saddamangala Karnaratna, the Commissioner of Archaeology, and also some epigraphists from the Tamil Nadu Department of Archaeology. I said earlier that the establishment of the faculty provided opportunities to the community around us as well. Although there were suspicions and antagonism towards the campus initially, within a year, the faculty was able to win the goodwill of the community. In the seminars I mentioned earlier, the South Asian Studies Seminar and the Epigraphy Seminar, more than half participants were from the community. The president, the dean, and other staff were invited as chief guests at school functions, especially prize givings and end-of-year dinners. The faculty even organized a series of lectures for the benefit of teachers and other interested members of the community. The dean was keen that the faculty should give intellectual leadership to the community. The faculty also inspired several able teachers to enroll for master's degree programs. Members of the community helped the faculty to collect archaeological artifacts as well as archival material. Some helped to identify vacant land near the campus to purchase for its expansion. As I've already taken a lot of time, I need to move on to say something about the threats faced by the faculty. The dean aimed at building a faculty that embraced diversity, a place where cultural interaction would take place. In the background of the deteriorating ethnic relations in the country, he felt that the faculty could be an example of ethnic harmony. A brief mention of some of the events that reflect this policy may be adequate. In 1975, when the first batch of Sinhala and Tamil medium students were welcomed at a meeting in Ramanathan Hall in the presence of the Vice Chancellor, the Dean addressed the students in Tamil, Sinhala, and English. This was perhaps the first time that the Dean of a faculty in a university in Sri Lanka had addressed incoming new students in all three languages. When the first Faculty Students' Union was formed and elections for the committee announced, there was feverish interest in the various posts. The dean found that the contest was going on ethnic lines. He had discussions with the leaders. The result was a unanimously elected committee. Events were also organized to promote cultural interaction. One such event was a campfire under the large shady tree near the entrance to the campus. Students and staff sat around the fire that night and sang folk songs in Sinhala and Tamil. These included songs from Sarat Chandra's famous folk drama Maname. But there were threats, both internal and external, to this spirit of harmony. The most serious threat came from the national political environment. The tensions generated by the general election of 1977 led to the closure of the Sinhala medium section in the faculty. There were also other areas in which the dean went against the trend. He was keen not to allow some of the unhealthy traditions that had developed in the other campuses to take root in the Jaffna faculty. One such thing was the ugly tradition of ragging. He held the view that this was a human rights violation that went against the grain of South Asian traditional culture, in which welcoming strangers and showing hospitality was an essential element. So it was indeed a pleasant sight to see in the early years when senior students welcomed new students and guided them to their reception in Ramanathan Hall. But there was always the threat of some sections of the senior students introducing this unhealthy practice. Slowly, ragging raised its ugly head. As the new campus was far away from the metropolis, it was feared that various forms of parochialism could be a threat. With the departure of the Sinhala medium students, the faculty staff and students were mainly from Jaffna. In the latter part of the first decade, there was a notable presence of students from the eastern province and a few from the central province. There were also some Muslim students, but regional and religious differences did not create any serious problems at that time. Talking of parochialism, I want to tell you an anecdote which I think is food for thought. A few years ago, a young relative of mine, after completing his studies at the Monash University in Australia, decided to visit Jaffna and see various places. When he came to see the University of Jaffna, he was told at the security post at the main entrance that he won't be allowed to enter because he was dressed in short pants. He learned from someone else that this was a rule imposed by students. When he told me this, I was horrified. This in the 21st century. I'll give you another anecdote to compare and draw your own conclusions. The year is 1931. 1931. The British Empire is at the height of its power and expansion. It is the largest and the most powerful empire the world had ever seen. The place is London, Buckingham Palace. The season, bitterly cold autumn. The two men in my anecdote, George V, King of the United Kingdom, Emperor of India, head of the mighty British Empire, and grandfather of the present monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. The other man Mahatma Gandhi, a leader of the non-violent nationalist movement in India fighting for independence. Gandhi was in London with an Indian delegation to discuss independence. He was invited, along with the other members of the delegation, by Emperor George for a tea party at the Buckingham Palace. The dress code specified in the invitation was morning dress. There was much speculation in the press as to what Gandhi would wear. As you surely know, Gandhi's dress was a dhoti, what we call a verti, worn in such a way that the legs below the knee are exposed, what in Jaffna we may call koduku cut. Koduku cut. And with that, a cotton shawl thrown round the shoulder, and also a pair of slippers. Dress that Gandhi wore actually provoked a comment from Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain during the Second World War. He described Gandhi as a half-naked fakir, a half-naked fakir, which was rendered in Tamil at that time as an Arai Nirvana Pakiri. Arai Nirvana Pakiri. Gandhi went to the emperor's tea party in the same dress. He was not turned away at the palace gates. The emperor met him. Gandhi had a chat with him and with Queen Mary. And Gandhi left the party early. The world press reported this with excitement. The New York Times reported the news with the heading, I quote, Gandhi in loincloth meets king and queen. Gandhi in loincloth meets king and queen. The Time magazine reported that Gandhi was, I quote again, wearing a loincloth and a shawl of homespun. Wearing a loincloth and a shawl of homespun. If what my relative told me was true, I worry that it may be a symptom of a deeper malaise. In the climate of sectarian hatred that is developing in South Asia today, cultural vigilantism could be a serious threat to liberal humanities education. Such vigilantes can stop the cultural degeneration that goes by the name of ragging. They really can, but they don't, and they won't. Getting back to the academic sphere, there were some worrisome threats. It's not possible to go into all these, but I would like to point out one, for it may still be a matter of great concern. The dean was concerned about the threat of inbreeding that could jeopardize academic excellence. Except for the heads of departments, most members of the academic staff were young assistant lecturers with only their Tamil medium degrees, first degrees. They were entitled to go overseas and obtain postgraduate degrees, but when the dean persuaded them to go to overseas universities, there was some resistance. Only a very few went to foreign universities. From the humanities departments, one went to Maharashtra, another to Tamil Nadu, but both were English medium graduates. The tendency was to pursue their postgraduate work in the Tamil medium within the faculty under the guidance of the same teachers who taught their undergraduate courses. Such inbreeding was certainly not conducive to the healthy development of the faculty. I think I've taken too much of your time. I've talked about the last 200 years of humanities education. Before I wind up, a word about the future may not be out of place. One cannot even think of the next 100 years, but we may ponder about the next decade. There is already much discussion in the West about the future of the humanities. It is being argued that the vast and rapid technological advancements that are taking place today will lead to a very significant evolutionary change to the human being. We started making tools to make our life easier. Today, we are on the verge of surrendering ourselves to our tools. I would like to quote an American academic who has been writing about the indispensability of the humanities in the 21st century. And I quote this from him. Through technologies such as bionics, transgenesis, robotics, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. Homo sapiens might be enabled to transcend its former limits and usher in an era of transhumanism. The relevant question is, what do we want to be? Enhancement technologies will make us more robotic and less human. We must treasure the advantages of our distinctly human capacities and resist the prospect of empowering ourselves to become automatons. Developing an understanding of the most insightful ideas and cultivating an appreciation of the greatest creative works that humankind has produced will be crucial for maintaining our humanity. End quotes. Your faculty has faced serious challenges ever since its establishment. The technological advancements, no doubt, add to these challenges. The political turmoil is not over yet. The world is entering a new era in its history when Asia again is in the ascendant. In this new era, there is the opportunity for your faculty to emerge as a coveted center of learning and to make valuable contributions to international scholarship. I wish you well and thank you for giving me this opportunity.